Hi, Isobel, good to see you.
I'm so glad you're here.
So, how much time do we have today?
I don't know, not very long, about 30 minutes.
30 minutes?
This is sort of, I wanted to squeeze this in because I really needed to talk to you about this particular issue.
Your email really made me think this was an important conversation for you
Yes.
to engage in. And I've been thinking about it for 2 days, and I'm hoping I can be helpful. It seems like one of those problems that could actually be a defining moment for you when you're starting your second year.
Yeah.
So maybe you could just initially talk me through a little bit about, we've talked about a lot of things in the past year, and I appreciate the way you've experienced this coaching model, because you have not been necessarily looking for answers, but you've been responsive to my questions, and I'm hoping, based on our prior work, that you've been able to reflect a lot on your work, and that this is an example. This is probably the first one that you surfaced that really seems to me to be a really sticky wicket. I mean, they've all been challenging. This one really seemed like it could be a major challenge. So I don't know the principals personally, but it sounds like from your email description that this guy, Pat, you're going to meet with has influence. So why don't you tell me a bit about elaborate a bit more from what you've told me in the email. Is he coming in mad? Let me ask you this: is he coming in angry? Is he expecting anything, or is this something that it's all on your end to initiate this
I think it's all on my end to
Okay.
initiate.
Can I take some notes while you talk? Do you mind?
Yeah, no, and I'm going to take notes too, and then,
Right.
well, between the two of us, we should get it covered, I think.
Right.
Well, the way I see it is, so you get brought in and you're supposed to be a change agent, right? You're supposed to establish, you're supposed to raise achievement. You're supposed to, do all these good things that are good for kids.
Yep.
And at the same time, the same people who brought you in to do these things also expect you to maintain relationships, and they have relationships, right? So
Yes.
Pat has been here a long time. Forgive me, but this is sort of the good old boy network at work.
Yeah.
They hang out together. This is a small place. Everyone knows each other, and if I were a parent of a kid in Pat's school, I'm sure I would feel like this was a good place to be. He's very suave. He's very competent appearing. The kids all look happy. They say good things about the school, and yet when you walk through the place and you actually see what's going on in classrooms,
Yep.
I have huge issues with what's going on. You see the white kids are in honors classes and the students of color are not, and excuse me, whether or not you're in an honors class or a regular class, it's not really great instruction. It's a lot of teacher talk, and I'm kind of done with it, And he's been so popular for so long that I can't see a way around it.
Let me just ask you a couple of quick things. Does he have any idea of the kind of you're thinking about his performance and his school in particular, or would this kind of be a new conversation?
So I was listening to this book on tape on the way over here this morning.
Yep.
And there was this line describing this character. Talked about him having a cast iron sense of his own importance.
No. This is him. But that's probably so. Having said that, does he have any idea that you might have other ideas about his performance?
Well, it's like when you say things in public and you say things in a setting where. So I've talked about instructional leadership in general terms, and he's been in the audience.
Yep.
But I'm pretty sure that he doesn't see what I've said as applying to him or his school. I think he's very self-assured and very, very...
What makes you think that?
Oh, now that's a really good question. That's a really good question. I think I don't know. I think I have this really strong image of him. I think he's arrogant. And yet, when you ask me that, I'm just not sure that I actually I don't have any data that says that he really doesn't think it applies to him.
That's surprising. So where do these feelings come from on your part, do you think, towards him? If you haven't got any real evidence or examples, where do these things come from?
Well, now that you mention it, I guess I'm making a lot of inferences based on what I know about the relationships that he has with people. But, you know, you could, I'm going to say you could be right, like you actually said anything, but, you know, it could be the case that that I'm making too many inferences. I get that.
Do you have any, are those inferences in the form of assumptions? Do you have some assumptions you have about him or his performance?
Yeah, sure I do.
As
soon as you asked me that, I could, like they all just sort of like laid out in front of me. So I assume that because he has these great relationships, that he's not going to be willing to change and that he's not going to be well disposed to my asking him questions about what's going on in his school.
Okay, I bet.
But you're right that those are assumptions.
So let's be sure I know what you want to get out of this meeting, because we have about 25 minutes left, 20 minutes left. Are you preparing for a meeting with him, or are we talking about larger issues with him for the long haul? Are you trying to want this meeting to be about your upcoming meeting with him in a concrete way? What would be best for you?
Well, I don't see them as mutually exclusive. So I guess I see it. I mean, I think that this is the first significant conversation in a long relationship with this guy, right? So this is not a conversation I'm having with someone that is going to be out the door as a result of this conversation. So I've got to be able to accomplish both, right? I've got to be able to talk about instructional leadership at the district and what I need and what I have observed in his school, but I also need it to be a building relationship, right? Yes. So it's a human capital meeting, but it's also a relationship meeting. That's very helpful for me to say that explain that you see it that way. Yeah, well, you remember you brought those competencies to the first meeting? Yeah. I look at them. That's great. And that's how that's how I parse these issues, is like, okay, well, this belongs in this column, and this, of course, I was going to get back to that eventually. I'm glad you brought them up, because they are kind of the foundation for our work. But let me ask you this in a related, on your train of thought you're on now then. Have you had any of these conversations with other principals that have gone really well? And if so, what do they look like? The conversation you're getting ready to have with Pat, what did they look like? Not in this district. Well, even in your other district. Tell me what they looked like when they went really well. When they went really well? Because I've had both. I bet. So I guess they go better when I start from a position of, sort of, what's that phrase? Humble inquiry, where I don't make assumptions. So I know that I need to do that, and I'm really glad that you asked that question about how do I know that that's how because that kind of burst that bubble. So I know that I need to. It's not like being cautious, but it's definitely dropping assumptions. And asking, what his picture of good instruction looks like, and how he sees his role, and how, because I should not start from the position that he's just letting things go. I mean, there could be really good reasons why. Well, I think it's great that you're already thinking in a reflective way about the upcoming meeting, but I was trying to get you to think about conversations with principals in the past that have gone well, and you move into that, which I think I can see what you're doing. You're kind of making the links already, and I think that's a powerful insight. And I'm trying to find a way to make sure that let's twist it a bit and say,
how have you made, in your past meetings with principals who have been instructional leaders, where the meeting has not gone well, how have you got that meeting back on track, where you've met with a principal who was not being cooperative in terms of your engaging them in a behavior-changing conference? How have you made it go better?
Well, there have been a couple of times when I've had to really kind of backtrack and say, maybe I should have not made that assumption. Maybe I should have, asked a better question. And frequently, it just doesn't really occur to you to there are just some things that seem so obvious that it's just.
You mean
I don't know, like Pat, right? I mean, the fact that he would be that arrogant and self-assured
yes.
seemed incredibly obvious to me until you asked me that question about how do I know, right? Because you build up this image of him. I have this image of him. I have this image of you, right? It's just really confident and self-assured. And I know you, right? I know that you will come in and ask questions and be, and strip down those assumptions.
Yeah.
But I guess
let's get back to Pat. How could you structure some beginning questions?
So I realize I have to sort of reconceptualize how I see him,
right?
I have to assume positive intent. I have to assume that he and I want the same things. I have to assume that that there's no reason why this meeting shouldn't go well. That because honestly, I'll kill you if you tell anyone this, but I think I'm a little threatened by him.
Well, is it even possible, given that, if you do feel those deep feelings, is it even possible you're able to do those two things, that you can assume a positive intent?
No, I can do that.
You can do that.
I can do that.
That's a big step in the right direction.
I think once I've actually, now that I've named it, and I realize that I've just built this set of assumptions around him, then I can. Let's
think about a couple of opening questions or opening comments that you might use when you have your meeting with him in a couple of days. So what are some ways to get on that track of assuming positive intent and no reason that the meeting can't go well? Is there a way you could signal early on, based on your prior work with other principals, that this meeting could have a positive outcome? So he starts feeling
I think, so it's not like I'm not confident, right? I mean, I think I'm confident enough to say to him, I just want to be really transparent here. That I assume that you and I want the same thing, and that you and I both looked at the same data around student achievement and achievement gaps, and I need you to help me understand why those data look the way they do from your perspective and your school and that lens. And then I need us to, once I understand that, I want us to work together on developing a plan where I can support you so that we make sure those goals are met. Because I know that high schools are hard, right? High schools they're like those giant tankers that are too big to go through the English Channel because it takes them so long to turn. That those high schools are difficult things to move.
Well, I'm glad that you see that, because I agree with that. So let me just run this by you and see if this is what you think you're going to do with him, because you jumped right into some potentially powerful action. So you want to be transparent, so he knows you're being transparent. You want to make sure he knows you both want the same thing. You're assuming that. You want to let him know that you've looked at the data about the high school. You've both looked at that data, and you want to understand how he sees the data, implying, it seems to me, that you see it differently, but we'll get back to that. And then you want to work together on a plan to move the high school to a better place. And then you close by saying, which I think is really powerful, that high schools are complex places, and your analogy about turning a big ship around seems to me to be a nice way to describe it. So are those the steps in the meeting itself, or are those kind of just how would you start the meeting? Would you start right in about, is that what you did here? Did you give me a script for the beginning, more or less?
I think that's what I did.
And can you project ahead and tell me what you think the outcome might be of the first 5 minutes of the meeting? Not the meeting itself, but based on those opening questions, knowing what you know about Pat, what do you anticipate his response to your beginning
Okay,
would be?
so that's really helpful too, because now, I need to think of that meeting in smaller chunks.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I need to check in with him because I don't want to get too far and then
Right.
realize that I've lost him.
Mm-hmm.
So when
How might you do that? What would you do?
I think that after I've made those statements about positive intent and wanting the same kinds of things, then I should check in with him
Mm-hmm.
and say, so how does that sound? Did I leave anything out? When you come into this meeting, what is it you want to hear from me?
Mm-hmm. So based on what you told me in the email and our earlier conversation today, it seems like you're predicting that he might respond arrogantly or overconfidently to that opportunity to engage him in a equal conversation. Are you prepared for him not coming out of that the way you just predicted? And if so, what you do to what's your next step?
But I'm happy to believe that he won't. So that's I really have to. If you're going to assume positive intent, it can't be a fake thing,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you really have to assume positive intent.
But don't you have to plan for the just in case you don't get
Yes,
the positive intent?
you do. So I don't know. I don't have a good answer to that.
See, I think that you have, just based on what you've said, you've got a very clear pathway forward if things go well, the way you've outlined them here. But I'm just trying to get you to think a bit in advance about what if they don't go as well in the first 5 minutes? Because the first 5 minutes seems to me to be quite critical here, to do the things you made your priority. Make sure you're transparent together, want the same thing, et cetera.
Yep.
And it sounds like you're worried early on. I didn't hear it in the last few minutes, but you're worried that he won't buy that.
Right. So the things he might say are things like, well, he could get initially very defensive. I
Mhm.
hope you're not trying to tell me that you want me to make big changes.
Yep.
I hope you're not trying to tell me that you think I don't have positive intent. I hope you're not trying to.
Mhm.
And so,
So then what?
so then what? So I think I'm pretty comfortable flowing with that. I mean, I think I can,
Mm-hmm.
because I am actually the person with the power in the room.
But you made it sound like in your email as though you were
Yeah,
really
I
going
know.
to draw a line in the sand, that this was not going to be me.
No,
You weren't
I
going to let
know.
it flow. You were going to actually at least get to a place where he knew this was maybe not an optional
Right.
conversation. So are you prepared to be more directive if needed, or are you going to let this dialogue continue over multiple meetings and let it potentially improve with time and strategy?
Okay, well, I know that I can't, okay, I'm going to mix my metaphors. I know I can't back myself into a corner where I have to draw a line in the sand. I know I can't do that.
Yep, right.
Because I can't afford to make an enemy out of the guy. But I know that I can. Okay, so I have technique at my disposal where I can ask him to engage, just in some experiments. Let's you and I go look at some classrooms together
Mhm.
and see if we see the same things.
Mhm.
Let's you and I sit down with the data and you tell me how you read it and I'll tell you how I see it. And we need to build a shared understanding. So I know that,
Is that those? I mean,
Those are-
don't lose those ideas. Those ideas seem like they would be things that, based on what I know of you so far, that would be right up your alley. So why are you thinking they only are alternatives? Why wouldn't you lead with those possibly?
well, that's a good, yeah.
I mean, it just seems like that's such your comfort style is to, based on your the way you operate with leaders in your district, developing shared understanding seems to be one of your first priorities.
Yeah.
And I'm worried that, based on what you told me, I'm worried that you're worried that your opening conversation won't get
Yeah.
you there.
Yep. Uh-huh.
So let's talk a bit more about this developing a shared understanding. What are
Yep.
some other ways you could help do that? You visit classrooms together possibly, look at data together possibly. What other things?
Those were good to start with.
Yep.
Those
Mhm.
are the biggies,
Yep,
right?
Yep. Anything else come to mind?
No, not right now.
Look at data, visit classrooms. I'm assuming that, for example, that you would, in both of those scores, looking at data together and visiting classrooms, you would both come out with very different perceptions of whatever objective reality you're looking at.
No, see, now you're making assumptions.
I am assuming that based on knowing you and knowing what's telling me about him. So I'm just trying to prepare you or get you thinking about how do you get the shared part in the center of the table. I'm afraid this might reinforce your unique points of view.
Right. Okay, now so you're saying that it would be more about me and less about shared?
Could be, because you have the power position, and I'd imagine he's going to be feeling as though you're telling him the right answers about looking at the data, looking at classrooms.
Right.
Or are you planning on being quiet for that and letting him do most of the trap setting?
Trap setting. You're bad. No, I will work on that. I can do that. I can ask, because when he says, this classroom looked good and the kids look engaged, I mean, I know what questions to ask. I've done that enough.
Sure.
Where I can ask him for data. And so this is all part of the same pattern, right?
Yes.
We're always just asking for data and how do you know and what did you see and bringing it down the ladder. I get that.
So how would you plan for that? In other words, if you head down that pathway, this is what we want to come out of this conversation with.
I'm going to plan for it just like it was another rounds visit, right? I'm going to ask for observational and not judgmental. I'm going to...
Are you thinking about doing this
with a
after
group?
your
Do you
meeting,
think
the
we
same
should do
day
it?
as the meeting? Just tell me what you're thinking practically about this. Would you be visiting classroom, looking at...
I see it, okay, so now in my head I see it as a flow chart. I see
Okay.
it as having the meeting, because the meeting is already scheduled, right?
Okay.
We've got to have the meeting.
Yep.
But then depending on what happens in terms of that first few minutes, because it's also possible that he could come in and say, I'm so glad you're here because I've heard so much about you in terms of your instructional leadership, and that is not my strong point. I run a tight ship.
I'm glad you're recognizing that, because that could be a very nice flow of the meeting.
I've had that happen too, where
That's
people
great.
have just come
I'm
in and
glad you
said.
recognize that. Now go back to what if it doesn't?
So what if it doesn't, and then, so if he just says, no, everything's great, and I'm like, okay, great. I'm so glad to hear that. So I want to come in, I want to understand what's going on in your school, I want to, because I think I definitely will say something about the data. So I need to understand why you're getting the data that you're getting, and then we'll be able to talk about how I'll find words for that.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful to think about, not necessarily this moment, but think about those words for that prior to your meeting with him. Not today so much, but you might want to think about that.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like that's a very important growth point for him and for you possibly, when you open up the door for this shared understanding, which is the main goal, it seems like, of your meeting. Is in a perfect world, you made that sound like that's what you'd like to come out. Shared understanding is the foundation to build from. And it sounds like that's possible. Can we talk even by phone after this meeting and see if
Yes. No, I'll be calling you.
Because I'd like to hear a bit about, because I just think the way you described it both early today and in the email makes me a little bit concerned that whatever happens here will be a bellwether for the future for other conversations with him and other administrators.
Bellwether.
That might be in his court. So I'm curious on your strategic decisions after the meeting. It sounds like you've got a set of things in the meetings you're going to be doing. You have two alternatives you've already sketched out. If things go well, you're going to simply build on the shared understanding that's already there, et cetera, and get him to realize you have the same intent, et cetera. We talked about that. If it doesn't go well, you're going to shift to a strategy that gets him to look at data with you openly together and then visit classrooms together. And then based on that, you'll have a series of questions together based on these collecting of data to get him to be more transparent with you on how he sees it. And either one of those two pathways could lead to a better place, it seems like, for him to develop an improvement plan for the school, that he wouldn't see you as a oppositional force, but maybe even a positive force. Does that sound like a plan for you?
Sounds good.
And we'll talk maybe on Friday if you're willing to give me a call if that works out. And if it doesn't work out, we'll talk over the weekend.
No, Friday's good. Friday's good. Can you take a picture of that and send it to me?
I'll clean it up first, I think. That'd be okay?
Yeah.
I'd love to send it to you, because I think I've outlined here, I saw what you wrote down, and I think my outline might be a little different than yours, which would be good to compare and contrast what you heard and what I think I heard.
That's good. Okay, well, that really helps. It really helps me get down the ladder and live on ground level again, and so that's really good.
Perfect, great. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.